Hello? I know we're standing in between you guys and lunch, so we'll try to make this as interesting as possible. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I think let's start. I'm curious, what's in your guys' wallets?
Let's see. I have like a Clipper card. No, I use a Charles Schwab debit card, free international ATM use, or free ATM use anywhere, which is useful for me. And then I have a Chase Sapphire Reserve and an American Express Platinum card. I travel a lot, so I value the Centurion Lounge.
What about cash? Any cash?
Yeah, actually, this is probably embarrassing. I probably have multiple currencies. Yeah, I have USD and Japanese yen.
I have a Chase Mileage Plus card. Before I had kids, I traveled a lot, and those miles were valuable. Now they are utterly worthless, and I'm too lazy to switch cards.
I'd be happy to take them off your hands, Jeff.
Okay, I'll hook you up. I've got my brand new Amex corporate card, that corporate policy from our parent in Chicago we now use for everything. I have my Wells Fargo debit card. I do not have with me my newly activated Chime debit card. I finally got money in it yesterday. Yes? I just got money in it yesterday. I haven't even used it yet. And a lot of cash. I carry a lot of cash.
A lot of cash.
Aside from in my wallet, though, I do sign up for every single card. So at home, I have like a stack of cards. Chime, Oxygen, Venmo. I can't even remember. Square. I have every card that comes out. I just try it out and make like a purchase. I'm costing them all money. Sorry, guys.
That unused fees. They love that.
That's good. So if a thief comes into your house, they can make a lot of $50 purchases?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. Well, I was going to use that to say who should go first. Jeff, you said you had lots of money in your wallet, lots of cash. So you can go first on background, who you are, what you do.
Well, I'm Jeff. I run the incubator at Yodlee. I've been doing that 4 years. In fact, according to LinkedIn, I just hit my 4-year anniversary. Prior to that, I was an investment banker. Prior to that, I started 2 companies of my own. I'm sort of a strategic investment, corp dev, journeyman in Silicon Valley. And I started my career also as an investment banker, because you can't ever escape Wall Street.
So I have been running 500 Startups Fintech for about 3 years. We had our first class in January. So we run an accelerator, but we also invest outside of that. We've done 57 investments in the past 3 years globally, and sort of with check sizes from 150K up to the most we have in any one company is a couple $1 million. And background before that, I'd started a few companies. One was a payments company in Chicago, was acquired by Groupon. One was a high-stakes auction company. We sell very large assets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that company was acquired in 2015. After the first exit in 2012, I became a pretty active angel investor, and that's what got me into doing it full-time. And before that, I was a management consultant. Before that, I spent some time in the nonprofit world with Kiva, also a fintech nonprofit.
So you said you have an accelerator and you have an investment fund. Does the investment fund invest in all of the companies that you accelerate?
Yes.
Okay. And Jeff, you guys are just the accelerator. There's no investment fund to it, right?
There's no fund at all. We focus on companies that might leverage financial information. We make sure they use Yodlee for that information. Then we accelerate their time to market. We do not provide any cash. We also don't take any equity. So it's very founder friendly. We've got a graduate here in the front row. Good to have you here. Yeah, so our focus is making sure that the companies do amazing things, and then Yodlee monetizes that by telling the world, look at the amazing things you can do with the data, come buy ours.
Cool, so kind of like a dual purpose, data, being part of the ecosystem, Yodlee behind all of this. There's more to it than just profit taking.
Absolutely. We are very focused on growing the ecosystem. I spend a lot of time with startups, a lot of time with bank innovation types. Our view is that as long as people are doing amazing things with data, Yodlee will get its market share.
For me, I'm entirely profit focused. But so like, in all honesty, like, look, so we're an investment fund, so we're in business to have good returns for our shareholders. But I guess the topic of this whole conversation is impact. So actually, a lot of what we do is impact focused. Partially, I think just my own background, starting in the nonprofit days, but also I think there's a lot of opportunity to make impact through what we do, especially in fintech, can impact people's lives. So while we are profit maximizing, I think a lot of the work that we do is focused on inclusion. And I think I invest globally, so there's a lot of folks in the world who you can bring into the financial system and make a lot of money if you can get them in there.
Right. And just sweet spot of what types of companies are attractive to you, Sheel?
Yeah, I tend to be among the earliest backers of the company. So kind of what you now call pre-seed round, which was the seed round, which kind of was the Series A back in the day. Might be, I don't know what they're going to call it next. But yeah, so I tend to be the earliest backer of the company.
I should point out, we are also for-profit. We're a public company. I have shareholders, the usual mutual funds. So we do make money. We just don't do it by investing. We do it by selling data. But like Sheel, what we've seen is that, courtesy of software and technology, you can make money in inclusion in a way that you couldn't before. It didn't make sense to have a branch to open a $50 account. It makes a lot of sense for Chime to open a $50 account. But all of that is powered by data, supplied by Yodlee. In terms of what we look for, we are also very early stage. I'll even go occasionally pre-product. So we have let in entrepreneurs with some wireframes. That is rare, but not unheard of. But our sweet spot is probably someone who is pre-seed, who's done a traditional friends and family round. So their uncle, the dentist, has supplied the money, not your friend and family who are all Silicon Valley VCs.
Sure. So they've raised some money from friends and family. They probably have a product, getting a little traction on that product, probably no revenues?
It depends. In fintech, it tends to be that like revenues come a little bit later than they do in like an e-commerce business or something. So yeah, it tends to be no revenue, but sometimes there are revenues.
Yeah, because we're not taking equity, that gives me freedom to be stage agnostic. So I have gone later stage, companies that have raised a few $1 million and do have revenue, but the vast majority of our companies are pre-revenue.
And then are there things that I hear the stage now, earliest stage, probably have a product, but what are like signals that you like to look for? Is this their second startup? Have they invested some of their own money? Like what is it that is a good signal to you guys when looking at companies?
Sure. So I think at the earliest stages that we both kind of play in, the most important thing is the team. And it's a team that I can get behind. And is this a leader that can clearly define their vision to me? Like, do I understand what they're building very easily? And if I can understand it, then they probably can sell other investors on it. They probably can sell future employees on it. So that's the thing I look for most. Probably secondarily is like, is there some technology advantage? We invest in businesses that scale through technology. So is there some advantage and is there, along with that, is the time now to launch this product? So like, a lot of people try to launch things before the mobile generation that just did not make sense, but now all of a sudden do. And then is the market big enough for the product? A lot of people say it's okay, like people start in a particular niche and then grow from that niche. That is true, but I like to see the opportunity, like the possibility that something is going to grow much larger. Because oftentimes moving from your niche is very difficult. So I like to see an opportunity that's large enough to make money. And then sort of the last thing I'd say I probably look for is some level of traction. As we talked about in fintech, traction does not equal revenue necessarily, but it could be there's some regulatory hurdles. It could be that they have built a team that I really like, stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. Team's essential. As Sheel said, if you can sell us, you can probably sell other people. I look a lot for understanding of the market. And it's weird because we're early stage, and so everything's going to change. So your estimate of CAC to LTV is sort of meaningless. But if you haven't thought that through and thought it through in a somewhat logical way, what makes me think you're going to be able to pivot in a somewhat logical way? So making sure that they understand the market dynamics and that they're clear on what they're trying to do with the recognition that will all change over time. A couple unusual things that we have. One is, because we're cohort-based but non-residential, we really focus on personality. We want to make sure that the 8 companies in our program are going to get along, so we look at that fairly extensively. And we also sort of are again, Yodlee specific. So, Yodlee needs to be key to what you're doing, so we look a lot at that as well. And our mandate is to find the new. So I will occasionally trade off sort of obvious success for something really new and interesting.
Sheel, what do you think about finding the new versus something that's like can be proven? It seems like there could be a big market, but this is cool and shiny.
I think, well, like, both are fair. I think a lot of the stuff in emerging markets that we do tends to take some model that was working elsewhere and then applying it to the emerging market. Although there are a lot of variations. Example is we're investors in this ride-sharing app called Grab. Started in Malaysia, now it's active throughout Southeast Asia. And when it started, it was like, this is an Uber clone, but actually they knew from the beginning this was not just an Uber clone that's ride sharing. This was like a multifaceted app that had a lot of fintech components because a lot of these people that you're serving are completely underbanked. So while it at the surface seemed like an Uber clone, actually this is an app that, one of the things they realized is people that use the app use it in the morning and the evening to get to and from work. But in between, they could do other services, so they could serve people lunch in the middle. So like these drivers that they had could be utilized all day long. And so anyway, it's something that's not new, but applied in a new place and then in a totally different way. So that's something that we look at a lot, especially internationally. And domestically, I'm looking for stuff like that's going to work. It doesn't matter whether they're the first player. Oftentimes, it's not the first player that wins. But on the other hand, if it is something that like I've seen a million times before, I'm probably just less interested in it, especially if the other things have not worked.
Sure. What if you've seen it a million times before, it's still never worked, this problem still needs to be solved? Is there scar tissue there, or are you still like, I want to find a team that's going to solve this?
I think there are a lot of things that Jeff and I were talking about earlier. I think there are a lot of apps out there that are your standard PFM, personal financial manager, that are your like Mint.com. So Mint.com. So if you talk about the evolution of how businesses banks acquire customers, it was like originally it was like by having the fancy building in town, they knew the name of that bank. Then it became like 25 years ago, really direct mail came into place, became really popular. After that, it was like Quinn Street, these lead gen sites online. Then it went to like your Mint.com, which still exists, but actually Mint was not a like amazing business. It was a business that Intuit needed to acquire. It was a reasonable acquisition. But Mint wasn't like, wasn't actually targeted to the individual. The offers that they sent were not that targeted. And then we had Credit Karma, massive opportunity. Credit Karma knows a lot about you and can send you a specific targeted offer that you're very likely to take. And then now, there are all these companies, I probably see like 30 or 40 of them a year. Jeff, how many do you see?
Dozens.
Yeah. That are basically like, okay, like we can connect into Plaid or Yodlee and just build basically what I call like pixels on top of Yodlee. And it's basically like, they're all the same damn thing. It's like a snapshot view of your finances. And what happens is like, initially they all can get to like 100,000 users, and then engagement falls off a cliff, and you can't actually get people to buy any products from these. So I've never seen a successful one that didn't pivot around. So if you're working on that, I'd encourage you to think about a pivot.
Yeah, I mean, this year I got, I think, 5 applications to help college students be more financially literate and manage their credit. And last year I got 5 applications. And the year before that, I think I got 3. Yes, it creates scar tissue. I want it to work. It's an important problem. I would love college students to have better credit. It's not going to work. We're not going to let any of them in. So that's that.
Sure. Okay, so Jeff, you're in the middle of picking your next class right now. I'd love to hear what the applicants are like, what kind of stuff you're seeing, some insights from the guy who gets to pick the next unicorns of fintech. Yeah,
we are mid-class picking. We had 124 applications. I am now down to 14, and was actually sitting in the back in some of the prior panels sending out diligence emails. So that's good fun, trying to multitask. And I'm going to focus on inclusion because that's the theme of this. And I did some analysis, and let's take a look. Of our 124, we had 16% that were explicitly focused on financial inclusion. That goes up to 20% if you include folks aiming at the gig economy. And most companies aiming at the gig economy are aiming at Uber drivers, not at high-end graphic designers. So they're fundamentally inclusion companies as well. And let's see, we had 8 PFMs. We had a bunch of college student ones, credit scores. Interesting, a bunch focused on helping manage mortgages. So that's a space we're seeing a lot of, and that is get rid of the traditional mortgage. We had a company trying a new layer to replace PMI. We had yet another roundup to pay off your mortgage. You got to round up a lot of Starbucks to pay off a mortgage, so that's a lot of lattes. So that's what we're seeing. We do look a lot at prop tech, both non-inclusion and inclusion. And we look a lot, our parent company sells software to financial advisors, so we look at that a lot more than most people in the Valley do.
And Sheel, your next class, you're not taking applications right now, are you?
No, we probably start at the beginning of the year.
And then what will that look like? You'll open up online, lots of people will apply from all over the world, all over San Francisco, all over the US, like what happens?
Yeah, we get applications from all over the world. I was telling Jeff we get like too many. We get a few thousand, and 90+% of them are just absolute garbage. But then among those few hundred, there's still a few hundred that are of the 10%. There are lots of good ones, and we spend a lot of time with them. But actually, a lot of our class does not come from necessarily that blind application process. A lot of it just comes from people I meet, or for my class in particular, it tends to be a lot of other investors will look at a company and say, hey, this company's too early for us. It might be a good fit for you, Sheel. Why don't you talk to them? So that tends to be how a lot of my deal flow comes.
From people sitting in this room.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're very fortunate. What about for the ones that aren't so fortunate, that have to cold apply online? You said there's a lot of garbage. Like just a well-thought-out sentence structure cuts through that garbage, or what is it?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it is like some broad categories will cut away. Some just, I have met and invested in a bunch of companies that came in through like a cold email. So it's not that it's like I'm so hard to reach. It's just if you have a thoughtful approach, I'm interested always.
Every investor will tell you that they've never invested in a cold business plan. I mean, almost every VC will say that. And I'm sure there are exceptions, but that is generally what VCs say. That is sort of true of us, but less so. Me in particular, again, my mandate is for the new, and I found that the cold application is more likely to be weird, out there, and something that I've never thought of than the stuff that I'm sourcing through the traditional networks, which tends to be traditional. So for us, we do pay a lot of attention to the cold applications. But yeah, it needs to be thought through. You need to actually be able to convey what are you doing, and does this make sense, and why does it make sense? And for us, again, how are you going to use Yodlee, and how does that affect what you do? So yeah, not surprisingly, a well thought through business plan is helpful in getting people to pay attention.
Sure, a well thought through business plan, cold email strategy of why you and why I'm interesting to you. So let's walk through a little case study. Got a startup. I'm in Ohio. I don't know anything about entrepreneurship, or I don't know any other startups. My parents gave me $20,000. I've built one of these cool little apps that sits on top of Yodlee, and I've spent my $20,000. Now I need to go raise some money. I've launched. I've got a few users. What should I do? How do I get to you guys? What should be my next steps? Sheel?
I think, like, so first of all, like, I was this person 10 years ago. I was like a management consultant working BCG in Chicago and had this idea for a payments company and basically started like cold emailing VCs. And at that time, there was AngelList. AngelList was not the like company that it is today, but it was actually like a list of angel investors. It was like a Google group. And I just like cold reached out to Naval. Naval, like, that's how I got started, was cold emails. So everybody can do it. There's no reason why you can't do it also. And then eventually, you know, I was in Chicago. Eventually, there was an investor who happened to be coming to Chicago. It was Dave McClure, and I met him for lunch, and he was like, okay, I'll give you money, and then he introduced me to some other folks, and that's just how it went. Now I'm here.
Cool. I've actually found, from my point of view, too, that cold emailing other startup founders that have raised money, that are one step or two steps in front of you, is really helpful, too. You get to hear their story, and then they say, oh, this is interesting. Why don't I introduce you to my investors? And then you get that warm introduction to an investor. And
or I can give a plug for your, so Alex reached out to me, was it 6 months ago? And he's like, hey, I've got this podcast. I'd love to feature you. So, of course, like, this ego boost that I get from someone wanting to feature me on their podcast is great. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you. And then I'm on his podcast, but really, he's like, yeah, let's talk about my business now. So that's another way, super novel. Appreciate it. You know, it's great.
And now I get to be up on a stage, all because I started the podcast as a gimmick to get to Sheel.
Yeah, Alex told me this strategy last week at Money 2020, and I was somewhat in awe of its genius. You know, I'm actually really easy to reach. Incubator@Yodlee.com. It's plastered all over our website. So it's not hard to reach me. But yes, you know, and again, most investors will say, find a warm introduction. And that's really valuable. We had a company that applied this year that didn't go through Techstars, but knew some Techstars people, and through Techstars reached out to 3 of our alums and referenced them all in the application. You know, being an entrepreneur is hard, and you need to be kind of scrappy and sometimes crafty. And if you can't figure out how to, you know, find a connection or do something innovative, what does that say about you as an entrepreneur?
So a quick counter on that would be, if they had referenced those 3 people, then you talked to those 3 people and they didn't really know much about the company, then it's like, well, that was useless. This is a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah. Be legit in your craftiness, not sneaky in your craftiness.
And I would just say from my experience, just be a human. I mean, jumping from, hey, do you want to be on my podcast, to like, hey, can I come over to your house for dinner? Like, that doesn't really work, but like, leading with the podcast, having a call, doing the podcast, maybe grabbing breakfast after, then a lunch, then like, all right, now come to my kid's birthday party. Like, all of those things kind of lead naturally. It's like on a date, you wouldn't like be on a first date and like be talking about getting married, you know? Like, there's a progression to this.
Yeah, and along the same lines, you know, we are going to be with our companies, you know, in our program a lot for 6 months and somewhat regularly, effectively forever. You know, Sheel's the same way. When you're an investor, you are with this company for a long time. Yeah, you kind of want to know them and ideally like them. And there's probably circumstances where someone's just an amazing investment and you hate them and you say, I'm going to do it anyway, but probably not. I'm not going to do that.
I have done it, and unfortunately it worked out, so I have to do it again.
So if any of you have amazing companies, but you're kind of not that nice, talk to Sheel.
What about the structure of the acceleration? How does it work, Jeff?
We are cohort-based. Our next class kicks off January 28th, and they'll graduate end of May. Again, we're non-residential. We don't want to make folks move to Silicon Valley. It's expensive here. The traffic's bad. And fintech entrepreneurs skew a little bit older. They're more likely to have a spouse or a mortgage or kids and not want to move to Silicon Valley for 3 months. So we have them stay where they are. We bring them in for 3 week-long boot camps over the course of 6 months. At the boot camp, we teach the Startup 101. We have speakers, panels, regulatory experts. We have mentorship and experts available in between the boot camps, graduate with demo day, and we open up the Yodlee ecosystem. We've been selling to banks and brokerage firms for 20 years now, and we know a lot of people.
Ours is a little bit different. Ours is a 4-month program. It is residential in San Francisco. We think that totally agree with what Jeff said. The traffic sucks. There's a lot of homeless people, but actually, it's useful for startups to be here for a little while. I think there's sort of a like fire in your ass that you get from being here, and there's also obviously all the investors are here. So it tends to be super useful for our companies to be here for 4 months. They also learn a lot from the other companies in the batch, so that camaraderie is really useful. Even sort of like 5 years on, companies tell us their best friends are still other folks from in that batch. Oftentimes, a company in the batch will acquire another company in the batch. Stuff like that happens all the time. And then in terms of our program, the like sort of leaders of it, are all ex-entrepreneurs, some level of success at least. And so, for example, myself, I started 2 companies that were acquired. Jake started NerdWallet. Yelena was head of credit cards at NerdWallet, which is by far the biggest product. Mike ran this innovation program for Swift. Swift, which is, so he knows the head of innovation of like every bank around the world, very good at connecting folks on a B2B standpoint. Itai ran an FX business. So we all have run businesses before, and we all love helping startups. That's the main thing. We just love helping startups. And then we have a distribution team. So we have folks who have just been like the head of growth at various different places who come in to help our companies. One sort of good metric is 3 of the people that I've hired for this role to be like my head of growth have ended up leaving to join one of my companies as a co-founder. So I always have to find new ones. So if you know any fantastic fintech head of growths, let me know. I'd love to hire them. And it's a sort of structured program, structured and unstructured. So like every week there's stuff you could go to, but you don't have to go to it. It's like a Chinese buffet. If you go to everything, if you eat everything, it's gonna like make you too full and have gas. But the same is true of our program. Like you kind of go to what you think is useful for your company. And over that 10 to 12 weeks, we try to prepare you for what comes at you. And then we, of course, stay in touch and very active afterwards. And I don't know if I mentioned this, we invest $150K into the companies.
10 to 12 weeks. How many of these do you do per year?
2.
You 2 per year. The next one opens in
March.
You'll get a few thousand applicants cold on the website, but if someone can run up to Sheel right after this and make you your friend and tell them about your startup, that idea is going to take over the world, then that's what you're much more receptive to.
Actually, so a lot of people will run up to us afterwards. The like trick is to not run up to us afterwards and then just reach out afterwards.
Referencing something we said here. And I'll point out, so we've had companies come out of Sheel's program into ours and vice versa. It's an amazing program. We focused on a lighter touch model. That's why it's non-residential. We don't have the fleets of growth experts that Sheel does. What I tell entrepreneurs is...
We had some of ours talk to yours folks, right?
Yeah, we work close together. So some of his folks have come in and helped our companies. I tell entrepreneurs, A, you don't have to choose. Since we don't take equity, you can actually do both. But B, figure out what you need and what you really want to achieve in a program, and then find the appropriate program for that. And sometimes it's Sheel's, and sometimes it's mine, and sometimes it's YC. And so as an entrepreneur, I think you should really think about, what do I want to get out of this incubation, and then pick the one that fits that.
We got the time to wrap up thing. Tacos are approaching.
Yeah, don't want to stand in between you guys and tacos. You look hungry. Okay. Sure.
All right, any questions?
Not all at once.
Hey guys, I was wondering, sort of given that both of you said how important sort of the team is, especially with these really early stage companies, and given what Gary referenced earlier, and that we're all very aware of, just sort of how sort of unrepresentative of our country as a whole a lot of these teams look like. How do you guys think about sort of diversity? How do you think about inclusion and sort of not just replicating what we're seeing and getting more of that in the companies that you select for your programs?
It's a great question. We think about it a lot. I think about it probably more than most because my wife studies gender and diversity for a living, and so I hear about it a lot. And to its credit, our F6S, which hosts our application, actually has a little gender tool, and you can analyze your entire applicant pool by gender. It is usually very grim. But we know what the studies show. Diverse teams produce better outcomes, and we do everything we can to promote that. One thing that we don't have the resources to do is sort of help build the team. We just don't have the network to say, you're missing a product person, and we'll help you form that team. That is not our model. We're a little too light touch to do that. I know some other programs do and are great at it.
Yeah, sort of similarly, I think we care about it a lot and do as much to like do outreach into different programs that we think might help us attract a more diverse pool. But just being frank here, in fintech, there are so few female entrepreneurs, it's very difficult. So like, if I've been in startups, we invest in all sorts of different companies, but fintech actually is way underrepresented in many different types of diversity if you exclude the foreign founders that we back. So I don't know, like, I don't know, we do a lot, we go to a lot of, we try to speak at events as much as we can, but still it's lacking in diversity of a particular type. You know, there's all sorts of diversity. We also try to back like founders that are a little bit older, you know, all sorts of, we try to get diverse on many different dimensions.
We're trying to do a more university outreach in the hope that universities are broadening the pool and they're doing a better job of attracting diverse people into fintech. That process is very, very early for us, so we'll see if it works.
For a while, I actually tried to make like an internal benchmark of like every cohort, which was like 10 companies, I tried to have at least 2 female CEOs, and then I actually was unsuccessful. Couldn't, even though I was like, I have to do this, I couldn't do it.
I just wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit more on your comment, Jeff, about entrepreneurs picking the correct incubator for them. And if you could maybe dig into a little bit of detail around what you should be looking for in terms of maybe is it the types of partnerships that the firm has, special relationships maybe with other programs or other bigger or sources of different types of infrastructure that an entrepreneur will need early on. And what kinds of entrepreneurs, do entrepreneurs have the ability to make that choice early on in a way? Like you're just trying to get someone to accept you? That's, I don't know, so.
Yeah, obviously it's easy to say, yes, you should pick the one that's right, when I think for the vast majority of entrepreneurs, you're going to pick the one you get into. And that's sort of how it is. But even when you're thinking about where to apply and where to sort of put the most energy, I feel like Sheel's program is really amazing at growth, and other programs might be a little more operational. Or FIS and Fiserv have programs. So they're really great if you want to sell to banks, and if you don't want to sell to banks, they're probably not the best use of your time. You know, I don't know, I think Mucker Labs is really good at operational stuff. And I mean, there's so many programs out there, I don't know all of them. But I do think thinking about where are you and what do you want to achieve is viable. That's one of the reasons we go a little bit earlier. You know, we will help you with product stuff. I think Sheel's probably better at helping you get more users for your product.
Yeah, I think at the earliest stages, the recommendation I give is like, at the earliest stages, not just accelerators, but this now applies to investors broadly, it's all about the help that you need. So like, at the earliest stages, you need help with a lot of different things, typically, like sort of hand-holding, like operational stuff and growth. So at the seed, I say, find a diverse set of investors who can help you with all of the different things that you need help with, if you can do that. And then later on, like Series A, I typically say, just get the strongest brand you can, it'll help you recruit people, and then Series B through beyond, just price, get the most money.